Good afternoon to everyone in the hall and to those who may be online. Welcome you here today to this Bible talk, which is clearly on creation, and obviously we're putting across the argument that it is fact, not theory, because we live in a society at the moment where creation is often pushed to the back or rejected altogether. But we'd like to bring out some interesting points, or what I thought were interesting points, looking at scientific arguments, because it's often science that argues against creation. So how about we look at science and show that actually science itself can be used to prove creation. So we're going to flip it on its head. Now, I'm not a scientist, so the things that we put across are based on actual scientists. They're experts in their fields, and they have taken the science themselves and they acknowledge the science is right, the science is correct, but they say that actually it doesn't disprove creation at all, it actually benefits creation, and they argue strongly against evolution. So a lot of the points we bring across are actual scientific observations, and the scientists behind them are actual scientists in their field, but they believe in creation and not evolution. As we know, everyone would fully understand that there is a troublesome question that's been going on for many years, and that is quite often, how do we get here? It's a simple question to ask, but this simple question has brought about decades and decades, hundreds of years of arguments and ideas and theories. But ultimately, it boils down to two, doesn't it, these days? And that is evolution, and that is creation. And these two sides of the argument have been going at it for many, many years. And really, we're going to home in just on these two. And so what we say, what we understand these days of evolution, is really what they believe is there was a specific point in time called the singularity point, where everything was in the beginning, and that is known as the Big Bang, and then there was inflation and matter and all sorts came out of it. Everything was created in this instant, and over a period of there on the left hand side you can see a period of around 13.7 billion years we get where we are today, and that's the evolutionary simplistic view of evolution and the creation of the universe. Along with that, we could obviously look at, how do we get here ourselves, was the question we raised at the beginning, and this is the theory that's come out of understanding of all these things, that we developed as a subspecies of monkey, and we progressed over millions of years, and ultimately mankind himself, as we are now, came from that progression of evolution from monkey to man. And they believe that, they've got all these evidence, all these schools, these different types of schools, and each of them is proof within this change from monkey to man. I have seen counter arguments very clearly that in a lot of cases of these, it can actually be proved that a lot of these are just simply monkeys, or just simply men or women. They're not actually proof in themselves, they are just a subspecies of monkey or man. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the full range, but that's what is believed, that is what is taught. What we find is, if we were to look up, look into evolution and the Big Bang, I found this particular quote, which is quite interesting. It says, the Big Bang theory does not provide any explanation for the initial conditions of the universe. Rather, it describes and explains the general evolution of the universe going forward from that point on. In other words, it's from the literal point of the Big Bang and forward to today. It cannot explain anything prior to that or what led to it. It is just literally a theory from a point in time that was the Big Bang. So it's limited, we could say, in that sense. So our initial thoughts when we consider the Big Bang is, no one knows why the Big Bang happened. It just happened. What went bang? How did it get there in the first place? Is perhaps one of the questions that we come to. And something needs to precede the thing that evolved. In other words, there's always something preceding something else. There's no real beginning. Even when you look into it and they get as far as they can and it goes beyond any scientific methods that we have and we can't prove it, even then they acknowledge something has to come before, and they start to really struggle to explain what was there right in the very beginning. Because every time they try and prove it, there's something else prior to that, something else, and it just goes on and on. And it gets very tricky and very complicated. But the ultimate one is, of course, with the evolutionary theories, there is absolutely no responsibility to the believer in evolution at all. And they are their own master. They can believe what they want, can do what they want, and they are free to live their lives how they want. And that is a big thing in a lot of people's lives. There is no actual responsibility to that person. And that is one of the very good arguments that come about why people perhaps choose this theory. Then very quickly we have the opposite argument. We have creation, don't we? In Genesis chapter 1, the record of Genesis. And throughout the whole of the Bible there are records of creation and how God created the heavens and the earth. And we often think of this idyllic paradise, and it was perfect. It was very good in the eyes of God, he said. Everything he created was absolutely wonderful. Even Adam and Eve, the first humans that he created, were perfect in that moment. They were very good. And that's what we think of, isn't it, when we think of creation? This is the opposite theory, that God created everything that we have in its very good state. And then, of course, we have, like we've mentioned, Adam and Eve. They lived in this paradise. They lived amongst the animals, which were all in harmony at that moment in time. There was no danger. There was no suffering, no pain. Everything. It was just right. But of course, we know that turned on its head when they failed to obey God, and that is another subject. It brings about answers a lot of problems that we have in the world. But what we have is the record, don't we, in Genesis 1 verse 1, that it was in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and that is the actual record that we have, isn't it? And that is what the creation, we call it a theory at the moment, but that's what the theory is, that there was an absolute start point, and we know what that start point was, we know how it came about, and we know the reasons why it came about, and we have a lot more answers to give as a result of it. There's an institute for creation research, and the whole method that they do is the scientists that are involved in this, and the experts and the researchers, their whole purpose is to prove creation. And a lot of the stuff that they do on there is to look into the science and the evidence around us and demonstrate that everything is there for creation. And it's an interesting website to look at occasionally. And I came across this particular quote where it says, "God has made evidence of his existence so abundantly obvious to all mankind that there is no excuse for denying him." So in their knowledge of everything that they've seen, and all the evidence in the world, of all the creation and all the science and everything that they've looked at, to them it's simply inexcusable to deny God, because it's staring you there in the face. And it carries on that there is no surprise then that there are many lines of evidence that confirm this biblical truth. So to them, there's so much that can be demonstrated to prove creation. So initial thoughts, what do we get from what we've looked at so far? That God has revealed why creation occurred. We have an explanation. We don't need we don't really know why. We have an explanation. We know how things came to the present because the Bible explains why we are here and the situation that we're in at the moment. That there is a beginning for all things. There isn't the need to keep going on and on and on and on. There is a beginning, an explanation. And belief in creation brings responsibility to God, and that's the critical thing, isn't it? It's the complete opposite to belief in evolution. If you believe in creation and acknowledge that creation has to be real, then you have to acknowledge that there is a God and there is now a responsibility to him. And that is the key thing there. So what are the problems? Well, perhaps one problem is, myself, I speak for myself and maybe for the majority in this room, we are not scientists. So perhaps we struggle with the scientific arguments. We were not present in the beginning. Well, that's an obvious statement, of course, but that is fact. We were not eyewitnesses to creation or to evolution. None of us were there. So none of us can say, I was an eyewitness, I know exactly what happened. So we have to rely on other things, don't we? We tend to only believe in the tangible as human beings. I know this exists because I can touch it, I can see it, I can smell things, I can feel it. And if I can do that, then I know it's real. The minute I can't do that, I can have doubts. You're just saying that. That's made up. Don't believe it. Show me the evidence. Show me the proof that it's real. And that's what we as human race often live, isn't it? We can believe in the tangible, but outside of that we may struggle to. Perhaps one of the problems is there appears to be evidence for both theories. Well, that makes sense. I can see why the evolutionists believe that. But I can also see why the creationists would argue this. Perhaps that's a problem for some people, is that there appears to be evidence on both sides of the argument. So who do we believe? Do we believe God? Or do we believe ourselves, mankind? And so really, these are a number of problems, and what develops out of these, and there are many more. For example, can we only believe that science is acceptable in an atheistic world? Does science only believe with the materialistic world and the spiritual world and religion? Science has nothing to do with it. Or can science itself be accepted alongside creation? Can we actually use the evidence of science? Does the world around us speak to us of evolutionary random progression, or does it scream to us of intelligent design? We have to answer that, don't we, ourselves? So we have these two arguments. Now it's interesting, one scientist put it this way, he says this is not about religion, this argument. He says this is actually an argument about the nature of reality. It's actual reality of why we're here. And so there are two clear world views, evolution or creation. And we came about due to natural methods, and we just happened, or we were made. It's as clear as that, isn't it? If we just happen to be here, then we have a number of issues or consequences as a result. What is the purpose of life? If we are just here by chance, what is our purpose in life? We might as well do whatever we want, as there are no real consequences other than the laws we have made ourselves as a race. What then happens when we die? Nothing is the clear, obvious answer to that, because we've removed everything else from it. It's just here by chance. We live, we die, end of. And we just return back to the ground. And as one scientist put it, basically then, we are worthless, because our lives have no meaning whatsoever, other than to have a period of life and of enjoyment to do whatever we want, and then we die and it's ended. So in his eyes, we are basically worthless. What we have is evolution has taken over science. In many cases, a lot of schools, a lot of books. It is taught now as a means by which everything is possible. This religion of evolution, of atheism, is forced upon generations as they get older. And this was based on also from American point of view, and it's certainly happened a lot more in America. And they say over there that absolutely everything has been removed about creation. They say then, as a result, science itself has just been overtaken. It's been hijacked, they said, by atheism. Yet science has been born, interestingly, and this is a really interesting point. They say science has been hijacked by atheism. Yet science has been born mainly from those that were Christian, who had Christian beliefs. For example, Sir Isaac Newton was trying to use mathematical reasoning to show that maths and reasoning only came from a creator. He acknowledges that. You could find the quotes for that. So he did not do what he did. He did not prove things to prove evolution. He used them to prove the creator. And so many early believing scientists believe that there had to be an intelligent mind behind it all so that we can understand the created world. Isn't that incredible, really? Many of the things that we have now in science came about by scientists who actually believed in the creator and an intelligent mind. And yet now we've moved ourselves so far away from that. Of course then, one of the other things is, do you believe and trust in God or not? We have the issue of authority, don't we? Who is authoritative in this? Do you trust in God and his word or man? Who has the authority here? Do we believe in a rational God who created a rational world and can be studied rationally? Or do we believe in an irrational beginning, a meaningless process that created a rational world that can be studied rationally? Well, it makes no sense, really. You would choose, surely, the rational object. If you've got a rational God who created a rational world that can be studied rationally, or do you believe in the complex mess that was in the beginning of the evolution that somehow created a rational world? So there's a lot of problems. Now, going back to another site called Answers in Genesis, it says creationists and evolutionists, Christians and non-Christians, all have the same facts. Well, we do, because we all live on the same earth. We all have the same science. We have the same everything around us. It says, think about it. We all have the same earth, the same fossil layers, the same animals and plants, the same stars. The facts are all the same. And it goes on to say the difference is in the way we all interpret the facts. So it boils down to. And why do we interpret facts differently? Why would I come to a different conclusion perhaps than to somebody else? Because in their mind it's because we start with different presuppositions. So I believe this happens. Now I'm going to look at this and see whether that fits. I've already got an idea in my mind why these things are. I already have a presupposition about it. And these are the things that are assumed to be true without being able to prove them. These then become the basis for other conclusions, it says. And it goes on, it's not until these two people recognise the argument is really about the presuppositions they have to start with that they will begin to deal with the foundational reasons for their different beliefs. A person will not interpret the facts differently until he or she puts on a different set of glasses, which means to change one's presuppositions. A Christian who understands these things can actually put on the evolutionist glasses without accepting the presuppositions as true and understand how he or she looks at facts. However, for a number of reasons, including spiritual ones, a non-Christian usually can't put on the Christian's glasses unless he or she recognises the presuppositional nature of the battle and is thus beginning to question his or her own presuppositions. It's interesting, isn't it? In their mind, it's easier for a Christian to go, I can understand why you think that. However, this is why I believe you are wrong. In their mind, it's very difficult to work the other way. Very often, creation's wrong, end of. And so that's where they think the problem lies, until you can change your presuppositions and look at it from the other point of view. So where do we start with all this that we've suddenly just thrown at you? A lot taken in, isn't it? Gone fairly quickly. Well, I'd say we start at the beginning, which may be obvious. And what does the beginning say as far as creation is? Because remember, we're looking at creation as fact or theory. And if we were to look at Genesis 1 verses 1 to 5, this is what we find. It says, in the beginning, so we have the start point, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So here we have the first day of creation, and a lot happened on day one, didn't it? Absolute lot happened. Created the heavens and the earth, created light, divided light from darkness, and we have the first day, don't we, as a result of that. And we find that it was good in the eyes of God. And so we have God, the Creator, and He created what? Well, we've just said He created the heavens. What does that mean? Well, in scientific form, therefore He created space. So He created the ability now, the space, to put something in. And in there He put the earth, and the earth equates to matter, a physical substance. He created actual matter, and He put it in the space that He's just now created. He created light itself. Now light is energy, and so He's now created energy source, a light. And He created day and night. He's divided the light from the darkness and created day and night, which ultimately creates time. And we have now the first day, and then we have the second day, the third day, and time now continues to roll. What we find is then, on this first day, these are the main elements of the universe. Nothing can exist without them, we find. Genesis tells us that God created them at the beginning of creation. Isn't that incredible, really, when you look at it scientifically? God created the four main elements of the universe, and without them, nothing can exist. And that is accepted also in mainstream science. The evolutionary explanation to that is the following: space, matter, energy, and time. And what they try and do is to say, well, okay, how did these come about? How do we get to the start point of these? And this is where they start going backwards. So going backwards, if we just to look at matter alone, we'd find if we took the matter of the universe and went back in time, we break it down into just neutrons and protons. And these came about 1/10 of a thousandth of a second, apparently, from the Big Bang. So this is where they explain where matter came from. And this is on an article on the BBC that was entitled, "What existed before the Big Bang?" So someone challenged them, well, what was before the Big Bang? And this was the answer that was posted before them. It says, before that point, so before this point, where just neutrons and protons came about, it says there was really no material in any familiar sense of the word. But physics lets us keep on tracing the timeline backwards to physical processes which predate any stable matter. And so it is, they said, okay, we can take it even further back. So we can go right back now to something that's called quarks. Don't really need to know what quarks are, but they make up neutrons and protons, which in turn make up matter. But they asked this question, but how did these particles come to exist in the first place? So there's the challenge, isn't it? Science-wise, it tells us this is how we get matter. But then they get challenged again, well, how did these particles then come to exist? Quantum field theory tells us that even a vacuum, supposedly corresponding to empty space-time, nothing, is full of physical activity in the form of energy fluctuations. So they say, okay, we go so far back and there has to be nothing. But even in this vacuum of nothing, they think, well, there must have been energy. So these fluctuations can give rise to particles popping out only to disappear shortly after. So from this nothing, with this energy source, physical form would appear, but then disappear. This may sound like a mathematical quirk rather than real physics, but such particles have been spotted in countless experiments, so they believe they've replicated this. The space-time vacuum state is seething with particles constantly being created and destroyed, apparently out of nothing. But perhaps all this really tells us is that the quantum vacuum is, despite its name, a something rather than a nothing. So you see how we've got back to a something again. So what was before then this something of this vacuum that created this energy. Where did the energy source come from? And you can see in my mind, there's always a question of where did this come from? And suppose we ask, where did space-time itself arise from? So they actually asked this question as well. Then we can go on turning the clock yet further back into the truly ancient Planck epoch, whatever the name comes from, a period so early in the universe's history that our best theories of physics break down. And there's their problem. They can't keep going back until physics completely breaks down, and they can't answer the question. And that's the evolutionary explanation on how we get the four elements of the makeup of the universe. Very quickly, there's these two rules of thermodynamics as well, which science accepts. I won't go into these in great deal at all. The two rules are that energy, and remember we said energy right at the beginning in this quantum vacuum, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So it has to constantly exist. And that the amount of useful energy in the universe is decreasing. So simply put, the second law suggests that there was a beginning. So there's rule 2 at the bottom. There was a start point, perhaps the Big Bang, perhaps creation, whatever we want to choose. But it says that there has to be a beginning to create all that energy in the first point, which is now decreasing. But the first contradicts it by saying that there couldn't have been a beginning. So rewinding back into the past, we have these equally true laws that contradict each other. It shows that the universe doesn't naturally have an explanation. So rule 1 means we can't create energy. So where's the start point for energy? Rule 2 says there is a start point, but they contradict each other. And there are many questions in science that haven't been answered, but there are problems with those that have, such as the forming of stars, but also the first rule of thermodynamics, that matter and energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Yet the theory of evolution insists that this must have happened at least once. So in Genesis 14 and verse 19, we have the following. God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So here we've jumped to day 4 of creation, and we see that it's the formation of stars and the sun and the moon. So when we look up into the night sky, we're now talking about all the stars that we see and beyond. And so now God has revealed that day 4 he created everything that we see in the heavens. Now, according to the evolutionary theory, this happens from the Big Bang and the compressing of gases under their own gravity. So here you have, it doesn't really come out so well on the screen. So on the top left you have just gases that make up stars. And then under their own gravity, because the gases would have their own gravitational pull, but because of their own gravitational pull they would start to compress under their own gravity. And slowly but surely over the millennia they would ultimately compress into a point that would become a star under that own gravitational pull. It's just literally pulling in on themselves. However, it was interesting when you read, you listen to the arguments of these scientists against this explanation. They have a problem with this, because they said that this compressing of gases under their own gravity, but according to science, the compression of gases will produce heat with 100 times more force than gravity. And the hot gases will want to expand as a result, not compress. So is it possible for stars to form in the way that evolution wishes us to believe they did? So these scientists are saying, well, this is great. Yes, there is gravity, and eventually they would perhaps pull themselves together. But science has proved when you try and compress gas, they just heat up. that heat is 100 times stronger than gravity. It would instead force them apart. So how do the stars form under evolutionary explanation? How have we got light from distant galaxies millions of light years away when the universe is only 6,000 years old? This is an argument that is apparently used a lot against creationists. Well, we've got galaxies millions of years away. The light takes that length of time to get here. You're telling me the universe is only 6,000 years old. How on earth does the light travel that distance when it's only 6,000 years old? So it's an argument used to discredit creation. However, there is an explanation which we'll look at in a moment. But what the counter-argument is, they're saying that the Big Bang also has a massive issue called the horizon problem, which is the following. It's been shown that the cosmic microwave background radiation of the universe, in other words, what's been left from the Big Bang, they can see back across the universe, they can see this microwave background to the universe. And they say that is left over from the initial Big Bang. And they can see it with the telescopes, measure it. And they've measured the uniformity of the temperature of this radiation. And they're saying the temperature is uniform throughout the whole of this background radiation. What scientists say is, well, this is a problem because we should instead see hot and cold spots. We shouldn't see uniform heat. We should see hot over here, cold here, and a mixture in between. It shouldn't be uniform. Because with light energy moving, we should instead see these hot spots and light moving between them to try and equal it out. Remember, light is energy. So this light should be going from the hot to the cold to try and equal it out. And that's what we should be seeing. But this isn't the case. This is not what they're seeing at all. But despite the universe being over 13 billion years old, light has not had enough time to travel across the universe. So the saying is that the light cannot travel far enough in the time that we've had. Even in 13 billion years, light cannot travel across the universe to be able to equal out these temperatures. Yet everything is uniform. How can it be uniform? The evolutionary problem is that this radiation should not be uniform, and yet it is. So what they're saying is, on the screen, this equilibrium background has been measured at being about 300,000 years old. That's when it happened, roughly. And they're saying is that the points upon there, the light would only travel to this small circle because it can only travel so far. And yet the known expanse of the universe is so big that light therefore could not have travelled between the two because they don't see each other. And so therefore it cannot be uniform. This has been proved by the discovery of redshift. Well, in Isaiah 45 and verse 12, we find that God has explained how this is possible, because he said, I made the earth and created man upon it. I, even my hands, have stretched out the heavens, and all their host have I commanded. And so God is suggesting he created everything and then stretched it out across the heavens, resulting in the universe that we now have. And he positioned things where he needed them to be. And so therefore distance wasn't an issue in what he created. There are some other problems that scientists have come up against. And one of them is the spiral galaxies that we often like to see on our computers as wallpapers, perhaps. They're amazing shots of the universe. And this is an example on the screen, and we can see it as a centre, and then there are spiral arms coming out. Now, apparently, the centre spins a lot faster than the outer edges. So it's spinning faster on the middle than on the outside. What they're saying is that it means that the spiral arms would eventually smear and would ultimately disappear as a result. And you would end up just with a disk rather than a spiral. They're saying that this is therefore an actual issue with billions of years. because they would have all smeared out by now. We shouldn't be seeing spiral galaxies, they're saying. We should just literally see disks. But we don't have that. We still have these spiral galaxies in existence, which therefore seem to suggest and isn't an issue for a young universe. Comets. We all know about comets. We know of Halley's comets. The Halley comets, we like to see them. Everyone gets excited when a comet comes across the sky. It's amazing to see. However, their comets are often put into two groups. There's what's called the short-term comet, which apparently they live for a few 100,000 years. And there's also the long-term comets, which apparently they live tens of millions of years, or perhaps up to 100 million years. So already we're seeing a problem with the timescales, because both should have all gone. They should have all disappeared by now, because if they were created billions of years ago as part of the Big Bang, they'd have all disappeared, because the timescale is too short. Again, are comets therefore an absolute proof for a young universe, because this is now not a problem if we're only talking 6,000 years. The sun, something we're so heavily dependent on. It brings life to our planet, it brings warmth, brings light. What they've discovered is it's powered by nuclear fusion, which is quite a fancy form of creating energy, which mankind would love to replicate, to have unlimited energy. And it's been powered for billions of years, apparently, but as it does and produces energy, its composition will change, meaning that the sun will ultimately brighten as it produces this energy. This in turn means the earth should get hotter as the sun gets brighter. Meaning, if we go from the point that we're at now, if we look at the sun now in its state, if we had to go backwards in time from its point up to the point when they say life first appeared on the earth, we would actually find that the earth should have been a frozen ice cube, because the sun would not have been producing enough energy. So the earth would have been frozen and life would not have been able to have lived. And yet it's quite convenient that it is not thought that this was the case. So we've worked out how the sun works and how it produces its energy, and as a result it's going to get brighter and brighter, but ignore the fact that the sun would not have been hot enough in the beginning when life first came upon this earth. Again, it's not a problem with a 6,000-year-old universe and a God who created it and placed it in the heavens. So creation, I would say, is ultimately absolutely a fact, because science has a lot of problems. It's answered a lot and has proved a lot of things, but often it proves it for creation and not evolution. But many will still argue against that, of course. Now, all that we have spoken about was demonstrated by scientists that looked at the science used to prove evolution, but instead can prove creation. Now, if a person is honest and admits that there is an unanswered questions with the science we use to discredit creation, they would come to the conclusion that there is more to it than simply saying evolution is just the answer, because clearly it isn't. God has created all things and created the science that we are discovering. And there is more that we could look at, such as the water cycles and other facts that were only discovered hundreds of years after the Bible text was written. Hopefully, though, what we have looked at has helped question the theory of evolution and encourage you to look into the biblical record of creation and see that there has to be a God who created all things, and that he has a purpose with his creation. Of course, that is a purpose that you and I can be part of, and I would ultimately love to show you that in more time. So thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully what we've shown is of some interest and will help look into these things in more depth and realise that creation is in fact fact and not theory. So thank you.